Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to Cheating Stories Best so you never miss a new tale. Today, we have an intriguing story that explores the depths of trust and suspicion in relationships. So, sit back and enjoy the show. Have you ever had that nagging feeling in your gut that something just isn't right, but you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong? Lately, I've been experiencing that very sensation, and it's driving me up the wall. I have this unsettling suspicion that Amy, my wife of 7 years, might be cheating on me. My name is Tom Matson, and despite the picture-perfect life we lead, there's an uneasiness brewing beneath the surface. I approached Amy about my concerns, and she lovingly reassured me that everything was perfectly fine between us. Yet, her warm words did little to quell my growing unease. Desperate for answers, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I enlisted my cousin, who was currently unemployed, to shadow Amy for a couple of weeks. I equipped him with a rental car and a high-quality video camera, instructing him to document any suspicious behavior he might witness. My cousin took his role seriously, meticulously tailing her and capturing her daily activities on tape. To my surprise, throughout his investigation, he reported nothing out of the ordinary. Amy seemed to be living her life without any signs of infidelity. As a senior project manager at a large bank, my job requires me to be in the office all day, and I rarely travel or work late. My schedule allowed me to be home most evenings and weekends, leaving no room for excuses about my absence. At just 29, I earn a decent income, and we enjoy a comfortable lifestyle in a lovely house with nice cars. We don't have kids yet, as both of us agreed to wait until Amy turns 30 so we could secure our finances before starting a family. We cherish our freedom and want to savor our time together before diving into the responsibilities of parenting. Amy, who is about 6 months younger than me, works as a dog groomer. After struggling to find a job in her field with her fine arts degree, I suggested she pursue her passion for dogs by starting her own business. We invested in a custom trailer that she could hook up to her SUV, and just like that, Amy launched her traveling dog care service. Before long, she had built a solid client base, visiting each of her regulars about once a month. Her heated trailer is equipped with hot water, a vacuum system, a hair dryer, air conditioning, and everything else she needs to care for her canine clients. Some of her clients even have dedicated pet washing areas next to their garages, so sometimes she uses those instead of her trailer. Amy has a small handheld terminal that lets her accept credit cards, but most of her payments are in cash, a fact I know well, as I assist her with her bookkeeping and taxes. So what's triggering my suspicion that she might be cheating on me? If I knew that, maybe I wouldn't be so anxious. Our intimate life has always been great. Amy is open to exploring new things in bed, and I can't recall ever refusing any of her requests. We share a solid bond, spending our evenings together, communicating openly, riding bikes, and hitting the gym as a team. So, where would she even have the chance to cheat on me? The only real time we spend apart is during our working hours, which is why I thought hiring my cousin to keep an eye on her was a sensible move. His report shocked me. He provided a detailed account of Amy's daily activities, complete with exact times, locations, and video footage of her arriving and leaving each appointment. No matter how I examined the findings, I found no glaring inconsistencies or unexplained gaps in her schedule. Everything matched up perfectly with her appointment calendar, and receipts aligned with her activities. Yet, despite all this, something felt off, almost imperceptibly so. There was a change in the way Amy looked at me, the tone of her smile, the lilt in her voice. It was subtle but unmistakable. For about 6 months, I tried to ignore it, but I could no longer bear the weight of my doubts. I couldn't confront her directly and accuse her of infidelity without any concrete evidence to back up my claims. Perhaps I was being paranoid, or maybe I was losing my grip on reality. When we socialized with friends, I kept a close watch on her, but she primarily mingled with the other women. I never saw her sneaking off to whisper to another guy or slipping away with anyone for a drink or a chat. I did my best to observe her discreetly, but Brad, one of my closest friends, caught on to my strange behavior during a recent party. "Tom, you need to let her off the leash a little," he said with a chuckle. "It looks like you're not letting this poor girl out of your sight. What's up with you, buddy?" Feeling exposed, I quickly shushed him, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. "Brad, I can't shake this feeling. I suspect she might be playing around," I confessed, keeping my voice low. Brad stared at me, seemingly shocked. "Wait, are you serious? You think Amy is cheating on you?" I nodded, my heart racing. I don't know what else to think. I just have this gut feeling, and it won't go away. Brad, still skeptical, looked at me with disbelief. "Tom, man, you're worrying for nothing. Amy is a great girl. Are you sure you're not just imagining things?" I wanted to believe him, but that lingering doubt wouldn't let me rest. I had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. The stakes were high, and I was determined to uncover what lay beneath the surface of my seemingly perfect life with Amy. "Cheating on you?" Brad raised his eyebrows and snorted, as if I had just spouted the most ridiculous nonsense he'd ever heard. "Huh? You're just crazy, dude. No way Amy would get mixed up with anyone at this party. How can you be so sure? How can you just dismiss the idea that she's off having a night with one of these guys?" I shot back, my heart racing as I glanced around the crowded room. "Get over yourself, man. About half the guys here are hitting on her because she's so hot. Sorry, buddy, but that's a fact." He spread his hands playfully, his expression lightening as he added, "I mean, just look at Amy. She's slim, toned, with great legs, a beautiful face, and a smile that lights up the whole room. Damn it, you're just incredibly lucky." Brad clicked his tongue in admiration and lightly punched me on the shoulder. "Now look," he continued, "all these guys are hovering around her like bees to a flower, but which of them is actually lucky? None of us." His face fell into a somewhat exaggerated pout. "Yeah, I said us because I've been pestering her at every opportunity, too." But then he raised a finger, waving it drunkenly in my direction. She never did anything but laugh in my face. The other guys said the same thing. "She always turns everything into a joke and even makes fun of all our tricks. God, what I wouldn't give to be in your place for just one night," he muttered, staring at Amy as she animatedly chatted with a group of women. I could feel my earlier suspicions bubbling up again, but I didn't like the way Brad was looking at my wife. I frowned, feeling a surge of protectiveness. "Oh my God, Brad. Do I have to kick your ass to keep you away from my wife?" "That's exactly what I'm talking about, you fool. You don't have to worry about that at all. For all of us, she is the untouchable lady. But believe me, as a friend, this is exactly how it is." He patted me on the shoulder, his expression earnest. "Well, that's easy for you to say," I drawled, rubbing my chin thoughtfully. "You might be right, but something just feels off. I know it." "Listen, Tom," he said decisively, "I love you like a brother, but if you screw this up and drive her away with your stupid suspicions, then I'll be the first to run to her door to get ahead of all those other guys. You've got to trust her." I waved my hand, feeling almost convinced by his heated speech. Okay, you're right. I was being stupid. I just love her with all my heart and don't want to lose her. Please, Brad, don't say anything about this to anyone. I'll try to put it all out of my mind." Brad laughed and patted me on the back. "That's great. Just go home and treat her right, or I'll come knocking on your door." This conversation became my first alarm bell, though it felt like a false signal. The party ended, and I took Amy home. We had a passionate night together, and as I lay in bed, calming my breathing, I replayed the conversation with Brad in my head. I finally decided I was wasting my energy and driving myself crazy for no reason. All my investigations had turned up nothing, and Amy continued to treat me like a king and the only man in her life. I drew a line under my doubts, reminding myself that I was tired of playing amateur detective and needed to start trusting my wife. When Amy arrived at Brad's house for his daughter's monthly grooming, she immediately sensed that something was off. "What's the matter, Brad?" she asked, concern etching her features. "You seem preoccupied." "How has Tom been lately?" he replied, answering her question with another question. "Is he still acting strange?" "No, it's only been a few days, but he seems fine. At our house, everything is as usual. Why are you suddenly asking about him?" She couldn't understand why he was so focused on Tom. "I saw him keeping his eyes on you at the last party." Brad hesitated, searching for the right words. "I had a little too much to drink and, well, I let slip that he seemed to be spying on you." "What? Are you serious? Now he'll make his thick-headed cousin watch you." Amy clasped her hands, her anger bubbling to the surface. "No, don't worry," Brad said in a calming voice, putting his hands forward as if to soothe her. "I pretended to be worried that he was starting to go crazy with his suspicions. I did everything as we agreed. I told Tom that the guys and I kept hitting on you, but you always kicked us away. I convinced him that there's absolutely nothing to worry about. I think he believed me." Brad grinned, trying to lighten the mood. "What's all this crap about his cousin, though? I told you, I've seen him around 4 times in the last couple of weeks. Although I've never noticed him before, it's odd." Amy frowned, biting her lower lip as she thought it over, twirling a lock of hair around her finger. "You know," she said hesitantly, "maybe I'm just being paranoid, but it feels like his cousin may have been following me. It's weird, I know. I think your husband suspected something was going on, but he couldn't figure out what. Did Tom tell you anything about this?" "No, he hasn't brought it up since the last time he asked me if we were okay." Amy rubbed her temples in frustration. "Damn, this really upsets me. I love him, but I'm afraid he would never accept this idea, so he must not find out what we did." "I agree. Tom is a good guy. If he ever found out about our arrangement, it would cause him a lot of pain." Amy nodded, her expression serious. "Well, okay, I have about an hour left. You want to, as usual?" "Yes, baby," Brad said enthusiastically, hurrying to take off his clothes. "Doll, I love it so much as usual. But I need $200 in cash, and I'll charge your card another $75 for services for Buster." Following Brad into the bedroom, Amy felt a familiar rush of excitement. That day, Brad was a bit more energetic and quick than usual. Afterward, they lay in bed together, arms wrapped around each other, talking quietly, lost in their own world. "Brad, you're going too." I knew I had to remind the guys to be careful with their words and to keep their tongues in check around Tom. It wasn't easy navigating these waters, but we all had our fair share of fun. Amy leaned back against Brad, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. "You guys have been so generous to me," she said, a playful gleam in her eye. "But in a couple of months, I'm going to stop this little side business." Brad's brows furrowed as he sat up straight, alarm flickering across his features. "Wait, why the sudden change of heart?" he asked, his tone betraying a hint of panic. "You can't just walk away from this. We're counting on you." "I've almost reached my goal of $122,000, she said, her tone dreamy as she spoke about her upcoming surprise trip to Hawaii with Tom. "I'm hoping that while we're there, Tom will get me pregnant." She smiled, absent-mindedly stroking her stomach, fingers dancing around her navel. "Of course, I'll have to go off birth control first, so I'm sorry, but I can't risk one of you accidentally becoming a father," she chuckled lightly. Brad's expression darkened, his playful mood evaporating as he processed her words. "Damn, Amy, "You're making me so upset," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "I never thought this would end so suddenly. We've been paying you good money for your services, you know that? Our wives would never allow us to do this." He leaned in closer, a pleading look in his eyes as he tried to persuade her to reconsider. "Come on, Amy. You can't just quit." In an impulsive moment, he leaned forward, attempting to kiss her, but she recoiled sharply, turning her head away. "Hey! What the hell are you doing, Brad?" she exclaimed, irritation bubbling to the surface. "We've talked about this before, no romance. This is strictly business. You all pay for a specific service, and that's all it is. Please don't make me remind you again." Brad pouted but quickly raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. Okay, I'm sorry. You're just so beautiful that sometimes I get carried away and lose control." "I know, sweetie," she replied, a grin breaking through her annoyance as she gently patted his cheek. "I like all of you guys, and I truly enjoy our time together. But this isn't love, it's just business, nothing more." With a sweet stretch, she hopped off the bed, gathering her scattered clothes. "I need to give Buster a quick shampoo before I leave," she said, her tone shifting to a businesslike efficiency. "And you need to get back to work. I have appointments lined up for the next 4 weeks, but today is the last time we'll do this," she concluded, gesturing to the bed with a finality that hung in the air. "Oh, I'm really going to miss this," Brad sighed, lowering his head in disappointment. But then, a spark of inspiration lit up his face. "Okay, how about we keep this going after you get pregnant?" Amy laughed, the sound light and airy. "That's unlikely. After my trip to Hawaii, I plan to quit this whole side gig for good." "Just think about it, okay?" Brad insisted, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "It would be so hot and exciting. I bet the other guys would want to try it too. Heck, we might even pay extra." As she poured water for Buster's bath, Amy chuckled again. "It sounds tempting, but I don't want to take that risk anymore. I love Tom, and he doesn't see things the way I do. For him, intimacy is always tied to love. He would never understand or accept our business arrangement." "Yes, and Millie and the other wives would be furious if they found out," Brad replied, shaking his head. While Amy was shampooing Buster, memories flooded back of her first encounters with Brad. He had pestered her every time she came to tend to his dog, always dropping suggestive hints, looking for any chance to touch or brush against her. Finally, she'd reached her breaking point and had told him to behave himself. "If I didn't need the money so much, I would have dropped you as a client right then and there." Instantly, Brad seized the opportunity, offering her a hefty tip if she would just let him feel her up. Amy had paused, contemplating the small concession. After all, it would help her save money faster for that vacation. Reluctantly, she agreed. Before long, Brad was pushing the limits, begging her for more and more intimate acts, continually sweetening the pot with cash. When he once offered her $1,000, she dismissed him, teasing him that he was bluffing. But when he returned with a stack of bills, each bill bearing the faces of American presidents, she realized her mistake. That night, they crossed a line together, and her financial goal seemed a little closer. In subsequent visits, he only offered her $500 for each service, but then settled on $200 after some negotiation. Every month, he played poker with his friends, Tim, Frank, and Roland. It wasn't often, but when the chance arose, Tom joined them. Their table talk during the games often turned to intimate topics, filled with the usual male bravado about how their wives lacked imagination, didn't want to try anything new, and preferred to lie like logs in the missionary position. One evening, when Tom was absent from their gathering, a slightly tipsy Brad couldn't help himself. He leaned in, lowering his voice as he hinted at his latest conquest. "I've finally got a juicy woman at my complete disposal," he boasted. His friends immediately latched onto his words, demanding details. He casually asked them if they'd be willing to pay for the services of a married woman. They burst into laughter, dismissing him outright. When he insisted that he had only paid $200 for an experience unlike any other, they called him an old liar, mistaking drunken fantasies for reality, and advised him to sleep it off. But as Brad sat there, caught between camaraderie and longing, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was teetering on the edge of something that could change everything. Just a few days passed since the poker game when Tim called Brad, seeking confirmation on a story that had stirred a whirlwind of curiosity. Unsurprisingly, the other two players soon reached out as well, and before long, Amy found herself inundated with requests for her outcall service from 3 more casual acquaintances. With each meeting, she explained her services and laid out the ground rules. This would only happen once a month for the next 6 months. In no time, Amy was making about $800 a month from this side venture, in addition to the $1,200 she earned from dog grooming. She felt a flicker of guilt for secretly deceiving Tom at first, but that quickly faded. Renting out her services was just another business opportunity, much like her dog grooming enterprise. Deep down, she was confident in her love for Tom and envisioned a future together, complete with children. She never once hesitated at the thought of marrying him. With only a few weeks left to achieve her goals, Amy was determined to eliminate any unnecessary worries so she could focus on the impending birth of her child. Everything in her life seemed to be falling into place according to a carefully constructed plan. Meanwhile, Tom was at his desk, sifting through some financial reports, when his personal cell phone vibrated on the table. The screen lit up, revealing his cousin Chuck's name. Tom wondered what could have prompted Chuck to call him. "Hey, Chuck. How's it going?" he greeted, pressing the answer button. "Hi, Tom," Chuck replied. "Listen, I just finished watching this movie, and it made me think about the thing you asked me to look into a few weeks ago. Do you remember?" Tom sighed, remembering the uncomfortable conversation they'd had before. "Look, Chuck, it's over now. We didn't find anything, and Amy and I are fine," he assured his cousin. "I'm glad to hear everything is okay between you two," Chuck said. "But after watching this movie, I thought maybe I overlooked something. Since you say you and Amy have moved on, I guess it's not important anymore." Tom sensed an urgency behind Chuck's words. "Hold on, Chuck. What did you see that made you think you missed something?" Chuck hesitated before diving into the story. "Well, the movie was about this guy who used to be a realtor, but he was really selling drugs on the side. One day, he showed a house to a buyer, but instead of checking out the property, the buyer ended up purchasing illegal substances. The cops were outside, ready to swoop in." Tom's confusion grew. "What does that have to do with anything? Amy isn't a drug dealer, Chuck." "I know. I'm not saying that," Chuck insisted. "Just listen. The realtor was inside the house for a long time, pretending to sell it while actually conducting drug deals. Amy goes into people's homes and stays there for an hour or more, sometimes working in her trailer, sometimes out of sight." Tom felt a familiar knot of paranoia tighten in his stomach. "Look, Chuck, I need to get back to work. You're being ridiculous." "Damn it, Tom. Just think about it," Chuck pressed on. "I know she's not a realtor, but how can you be sure about what she's doing behind closed doors? Did you keep track of which dogs she worked with in her trailer versus in people's homes?" No, but..." Tom stumbled over his words. Chuck continued, "But if we had video footage of her coming and going, it could show if she went to her trailer or stayed inside those houses." "Did you keep any of that footage?" Tom asked hopefully. "No, I threw everything away after we spoke, remember?" Chuck replied. "Didn't I tell you to keep it?" Tom asked, growing more anxious. Chuck hesitated. "Well, you did say that, but..." "Chuck, I know you like to keep an eye on her. If you saved those notes, I promise I won't be mad," Tom urged. Okay, Chuck sighed, relief evident in his voice. "I'll go over everything again and summarize all the times Amy was inside houses during her trips. Can you come over later?" "Sure," Tom said, feeling a rush of nervous energy. "What time?" "Let's say around 4 p.m. "That should give me enough time to gather the information," Chuck replied. "All right, see you then," Tom said before ending the call, his mind racing. Chuck must be replaying those tapes and fantasizing about Amy. The poor guy needed a job and a new girlfriend. A few hours later, Tom and Chuck met at his cousin's apartment as planned. Chuck wasted no time diving into the notes he had compiled over the last 2 weeks. "I only found 3 addresses where Amy did her work. I have videos of her clients meeting her at each home," he said, pulling up the footage. Tom felt his heart race as he watched. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing at the screen. "That's the first one," Chuck replied. A little girl answered the door, followed by an old lady, her grandmother, I assume. Tom nodded, relieved. "Okay, that checks out." Chuck fast-forwarded the video. Now, the second case involves a guy who let her in. About 10 minutes later, he left. "Wait, so he just left her there?" Tom asked, anxiety creeping back into his voice. "Yeah, see?" Chuck pointed at the screen, where the man's face was visible as he backed out of the driveway. After he leaves, Amy goes out the front door, which automatically latches behind her. "I don't know if anyone else was in the house, but..." Tom's mind raced as Chuck's words echoed in his ears. The dots began to connect in a way he hadn't expected. What if there was more to Amy's side business than he realized? What if she was leading a double life? The thought filled him with dread, leaving him to wonder what secrets lay hidden behind closed doors. Tom rubbed his forehead, squinting at the grainy video on the screen. "It all adds up, doesn't it?" he mused, glancing at Chuck. "I just can't shake this feeling." Chuck leaned closer, excitement flickering in his eyes. "What did you find out at the third address?" "That's where it gets interesting." Tom watched as Chuck maneuvered the mouse, rewinding the footage. "Here," Chuck said, pointing. "See? The guy lets her in. Then about an hour later, hold on, I'll rewind that. There. You see that? Amy walks out right after him." Tom's heart raced as he took in the image of his wife stepping out of the house. A hollow feeling settled in his stomach. The sight of her paired with that man, who was he? After a moment of silence, Tom's gaze drifted away from the screen, lost in thought. "Hey, Tom, you okay?" Chuck waved his hand in front of Tom's face, breaking him from his stupor. Tom blinked a couple of times, still processing what he saw. "I know that house," he finally muttered, recalling the man Amy had spent an hour with. "I know him. What if?" His thoughts spiraled out of control, panic settling in. "What's going on?" Chuck prompted, his voice steady. "I just can't believe this," Tom said, pulling out his phone. He opened his calendar to check Amy's next work meeting, scheduled for next month. In that last house, the master bedroom is on the first floor. "Do you think you could sneak a peek inside without getting arrested?" Chuck hesitated. "Maybe," he said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "But if the curtains are drawn, I won't be able to see anything." "Do you really think there?" Tom winced at the implication. "Probably," he muttered, the realization stinging. "But he's our friend. This could all turn out to be nothing." Chuck raised an eyebrow. "You mean you're still hoping it's all innocent?" "Damn it, Chuck. I can't keep doing this." Tom exploded, slamming his fist on the table. The sound echoed in the small room, amplifying the tension. Chuck stayed silent, giving Tom space to vent. Tom sat back down, his fists clenched, trying to regain his composure. "She should be back tomorrow. What if I asked you to follow her and see what's really going on?" Chuck nodded slowly, sensing the urgency in Tom's voice. "Yeah, I can do that. But what if they're not in the master bedroom?" Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. Just do what you can, and try not to get caught. If Amy sees you, she'll know I sent you. Got it, Chuck replied. I'll wear a disguise and take my mom's minivan instead of my car. I can wait for her at the house. I already know when she's scheduled to show up, so I won't need to follow her around. Just be careful this time, okay? Tom insisted, concern lacing his tone. Chuck assured him he would be cautious, and they parted ways. Both knew tomorrow would be crucial. The next morning, Chuck arrived at the street 1 block from Brad's house by 9:30 a.m. After scouting the area the night before. He found a way into the neighbor's yard through some bushes. He parked the minivan to keep it out of sight, giving him a clear view of Brad's backyard door. As he waited, Chuck noticed Brad's dog was already outside. When Amy arrived, the dog barked excitedly, racing toward her as she opened the patio door. Buster, the dog, jumped around Amy, his joy contagious. Chuck took a deep breath, adrenaline surging through him. After a few moments, he dashed across the lawn to the corner of the house, pressing his back against the wall to catch his breath. He edged closer to the bedroom window and cursed under his breath when he saw the blinds were drawn. Determined, he glanced at the other 2 windows but hesitated. If he moved there, a neighbor might see him. As he stood frozen, trying to figure out his next move, he noticed a woman on the far side of the house letting her dog out. The dog instantly spotted Chuck and bolted toward the fence, barking loudly. Crap! Chuck muttered, deciding he had no choice. He slipped around the corner of the house and cautiously approached the first window. The blinds were partially closed but not completely, giving him just enough space to peek inside. Chuck positioned his camera carefully, aligning it with the gap in the blinds. As he pressed record, he pressed his cheek against the wall, frozen in place, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside the bedroom, Chuck strained to hear anything, his mind racing with possibilities. What was Amy doing? Who was that man? The questions buzzed in his head like angry hornets. He held his breath, praying for a glimpse of the truth, unaware that he was about to unearth secrets that would change everything. Time stretched endlessly as he waited, the tension thickening in the air. Every sound made him jump. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a tightrope, balancing on the edge of a revelation that could shatter everything he thought he knew. Chuck peered through the window, holding his phone at an awkward angle. He felt like a self-proclaimed detective, filming blindly while trying not to lean over too much for fear that any sudden movement would give him away. He was desperate to capture the scene inside without alerting anyone. Slowly, he maneuvered the camera, praying he would record enough of the room to make it worthwhile. Suddenly, he heard shuffling footsteps nearby, followed by a quiet conversation that broke the morning silence. His heart sank as he caught sight of an elderly couple strolling down the path in front of the house. Chuck froze, his heart racing, and watched them with wide eyes, not daring to move until they were finally out of sight. Once they disappeared, he let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Realizing he had pushed his luck long enough, he glanced around, ensuring the coast was clear, and then dashed across the sidewalk, leaping over the fence like a cat on the prowl. A neighbor's dog barked angrily at him, but Chuck managed to keep his movements low-key as he made his way around the block back to his car. He felt a rush of adrenaline as he sank into the driver's seat, sweat dripping down his forehead. He couldn't help but feel a boyish thrill at the prospect of having successfully completed his task. He tossed his phone onto the passenger seat and fished a tissue from his pocket, wiping his sweaty brow and neck. It's time to get out of here, he thought, starting the minivan and pulling out onto the road. As he drove towards home, his phone rang. "Hey, it's Tom," his brother's voice came through the earpiece, laced with impatience. "Did you see anything?" Chuck could hear the tension in Tom's voice. He'd been waiting anxiously for news. "Sorry, brother. I almost got caught back there," Chuck replied, his voice low. "I didn't see much, but I might have captured something on video from the room." Tom's voice sharpened with urgency. "What do you mean?" might have? Did you get the video or not? Chuck briefly recounted his undercover operation, emphasizing how he hadn't had the chance to review the footage himself yet. I'm on my way home now. Wait. Don't come home yet. Tom interrupted, his eagerness palpable. Come to my office instead. We can watch the video there. I'll let the front desk know you're coming, and they'll take you upstairs. 15 minutes later, Chuck arrived at Tom's office, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. He handed Tom the camera, who immediately connected it to his personal laptop. The video began with an awkward shot of the side of a bed. Chuck watched as the camera wobbled, catching glimpses of human knees and shins, but nothing substantial. Tom sighed in frustration and slammed his hand on the table. This is completely useless. You can't see a damn thing, he exclaimed, his irritation boiling over. Just as Tom's frustration reached its peak, the image shifted abruptly. Two bodies came into view, and the camera panned upward, revealing a ceiling fan overhead. Wait, what was that? Can we rewind it? Tom shouted excitedly, reaching for the laptop's keyboard. Hold on, Chuck cautioned, grabbing Tom's arm. The camera shook again as it moved down from the ceiling to the bed, and then Tom gasped, the air knocked out of him. The camera focused on the couple engaged in a passionate embrace. Brad, with a look of bliss plastered on his face, gripped the woman's hips tightly as she moved rhythmically against him. After a few heart-stopping moments, Amy, with her eyes half-closed, suddenly turned her face and looked directly at the camera. In an instant, Tom's world collapsed. He slumped back in his chair, staring blankly at the screen where his wife was caught in the act of betrayal. His heart sank as he watched the intimate scene unfold, his lower lip quivering like that of a hurt child. Tears welled in his eyes, and he remained frozen, trapped in a moment he wished he could erase. After what felt like an eternity, the recording ended. Chuck, heavy-hearted, turned off the camera and disconnected it from the laptop. He removed the video memory card and handed it to Tom, his expression somber. I'm so sorry, cousin. I held on to hope until the very end that I was wrong. He gently patted Tom on the back, but Tom remained unresponsive, lost in his pain. Chuck gathered his belongings and left the office, closing the door quietly behind him. Across town, Brad sat in his office, absently staring out the window as he spoke on the phone. Yeah, dude, she told me she wants to end our arrangement, he said, irritation creeping into his tone. She's planning a trip to Hawaii with Tom and wants to surprise him. Apparently, she's thinking about getting pregnant while they're there. Brad grimaced as if he had just bitten into a sour lemon and kicked the leg of his desk in annoyance. I tried to talk her out of it, but she's set on this. I think she'll fill you in next week when you see her. Yeah, well, good luck convincing her otherwise, Tim said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. See you later. Brad hung up, irritation bubbling inside him. He had become accustomed to the regular intimacy with Amy over these past months, not that he was in love, but he certainly enjoyed their time together. It had become a habit, a routine he found himself looking forward to, regardless of the fact that he had to pay for her company. After all, for a measly $200, no professional woman of the night would turn down the chance to spend time with a hot, young married woman. But now, as he sat alone in his office, a cold knot formed in the pit of his stomach. He realized that the fun he had been having was coming to an end, and he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that their escapade was spiraling out of control. Even without a rubber band? Tom muttered incredulously as he recalled the conversation. Amy had agreed to everything so easily, unaware of the implications of her choices. For Brad and his friends, this little arrangement of hers was turning into quite a lucrative business. The next morning, as Marguerite, the housekeeper, began unpacking the bedding in the master bedroom, she noticed the disarray. You'd think the owners would feel embarrassed leaving the bed in such a state, but Marguerite seemed unfazed. She replaced the stained sheets with fresh ones, tidied up the bed, and moved on to clean the rest of the house. Meanwhile, Tom sat at his desk in the office, his mind racing like a swarm of cockroaches as he tried to make sense of what he had seen on the videos. He wanted desperately to convince himself that it wasn't true, but deep down, he knew it was. Amy wasn't under the influence of alcohol or pills, she was fully engaged and in it for the money. Suddenly, a terrifying thought pierced through his mind like lightning. What if she had others? Brad had warned him at the party that all his friends were hitting on Amy. What if Brad wasn't the only one? Dreadful images flooded his mind, Amy willingly exposing herself to all those men who had been circling around her like vultures. In a fit of impotent rage, Tom slammed his fist down on the table, sending his half-finished mug of coffee toppling over, spilling brown liquid all over his notes and business papers. In that moment, he didn't care about the mess. He wanted to scream, to stomp his feet, and to crush the jaws of her lovers who had deceived him, pretending to be friends while betraying him behind his back. As the rage slowly dissipated, reality came crashing down. He realized he needed to gather more evidence of Amy's infidelity. "Damn, I'm going to need Chuck's help again," he muttered to himself. Over the next 4 weeks, Chuck settled into his role as an undercover detective. He compiled a shocking collection of videos featuring Amy with Tim, Roland, and Frank. Tom's worst fears were confirmed when he learned that all the guys he had once considered friends were intimately involved with his wife. The humiliation was deep and excruciating, yet somehow, he managed to maintain a facade at home and work, convincing everyone that everything was fine. Every morning and evening, he stood in front of the bathroom mirror, hands resting on the sink, staring at his own reflection. "You have to pretend nothing happened," he chanted to himself like a mantra. "Just act normal." All the while, he meticulously collected irrefutable evidence against her. When Tom arrived home at his usual time one evening, Amy greeted him with unexpected warmth. "I'm inviting you to dinner at your favorite steakhouse," she said brightly. Despite his weariness, he managed to put on a convincing smile. An invitation from her was a rarity in their lives, and he was curious about why she had initiated this gesture. Over dinner, Tom found himself wondering what had prompted this sudden change in Amy. When they returned home, she sat him down on the sofa and laid out travel brochures about Hawaiian attractions in front of him. With excitement in her voice, she explained how she had spent a year saving her earnings to fund their future trip. Her eyes sparkled as she detailed every aspect of the trip she had meticulously planned and paid for in advance. She even admitted that she had secretly contacted his boss to arrange for the trip, ensuring that Tom's upcoming vacation was fully approved by his superiors. Tom was momentarily overwhelmed. They had discussed such a trip many times before, but its steep cost had forced them to postpone it. Now, Amy radiated joy, and Tom could hardly wrap his head around the surprise she had orchestrated. "Darling, everything is carefully timed," Amy said, holding up her fingers as she began counting off her plans. "I'm going off birth control so that when we get to Hawaii, I'll be ovulating. We'll make love twice a day, and I'll return home pregnant with our child. Isn't that the most romantic thing you've ever heard?" Her enthusiasm was palpable as she nearly clapped her hands, clearly proud of how wonderfully she had organized everything. Tom took a moment to process her words. He mentally analyzed his own feelings, then clapped his hands together, turning to her with a grin. "What a wonderful surprise, my dear. I think your plan will work just fine for us," he said, masking his internal turmoil. Amy squealed in delight, jumping into his lap and wrapping her arms around him. "I'm so glad, honey. Come on, let's hurry and practice making babies," she urged, her eagerness infectious. Tom couldn't deny the thrill he felt at her words, even though he knew it was strange to refuse her insistence at such a moment. So, he went along with it, allowing himself to indulge in the intimacy of the moment, a temporary escape from the reality he was grappling with. They shared a passionate night together before Tom finally drifted off to sleep. Meanwhile, Sally Hawk, the divorce lawyer Tom had contacted, watched the videos he and Chuck had collected. She listened intently as Tom explained his desire for honor to be served, fully aware of the emotional storm brewing within him. Sally leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen rhythmically against the polished surface of the conference table. "So, you're saying you want to serve the divorce papers at the airport while delivering those videos to all 4 wives at the same time. You're also planning to have their boyfriends hit with bogus lawsuits for alienation of affection?" Her brow furrowed slightly as she assessed Tom's plan. "Exactly," Tom replied, a smirk creeping onto his face. "They'll all be gathered at the airport for a big farewell party to send Amy and me off on our trip. I've arranged for a limousine to pick up all 4 couples and take them to the airport. We've even reserved tables in the waiting area, complete with drinks and snacks." Sally leaned in, intrigued. "And what's the surprise you have in store?" Tom's eyes glinted with a mix of excitement and vindictiveness. "A huge banner that says farewell. We'll unfurl just as Amy is served her court papers. I want to shock everyone there while adding a little chaos to their carefree lives." "Whoa," Sally said, raising her hand in a cautionary gesture. "Hold on. You shouldn't swear in my office, Mr. Matson. While I understand your anger, no one has ever asked me to orchestrate something like this before. But I have to admit, it sounds like a real spectacle." A grin broke across her face. "When do you want your performer to show up at the airport?" Tom's mind raced as he considered the timing. "It needs to happen right when they announce the boarding for our flight to Hawaii. That'll be Saturday at 1 p.m. Finally, the day arrived. As the deceivers and their unsuspecting spouses gathered in the bustling airport lounge, the air was filled with the cheerful chatter of couples excited about their getaway. Their luggage had already been checked in, including some of Amy's personal items that Tom had packed, thinking she'd need them on vacation. Tom watched the clock intently, glancing at it every few moments. Just before Sally's assistant was due to arrive with the divorce papers, he stood up, commanding everyone's attention. "Dear Amy," he began, his voice rich with false affection. She looked radiant in a bright vacation dress, her smile wide and genuine. "You've been the love of my life since we met almost 9 years ago. I've always been proud of the hard work you put into building your modest little business into a successful enterprise." His ambiguous remark sparked a flurry of knowing glances and cynical smirks exchanged among her lovers, and Amy froze momentarily, a flicker of alarm crossing her features. Tom continued, "When you decided to spend all your profits on this fabulous vacation, I was genuinely happy for you." He raised a glass of champagne in her direction. "As a small token of gratitude, while my assistant distributes gifts, let's raise our glasses to Amy and wish her a bon voyage." At that moment, the large, beautifully designed banner unfurled above them, just as Sally's assistant arrived and loudly announced, "Summons served." The cheerful atmosphere shattered into stunned silence. Amy's eyes widened as she caught sight of the divorce papers, her smile disappearing, replaced by a pale shock. Tom turned to the 4 stunned wives, his expression contrite. "Ladies, I sincerely apologize for the theatrics of this event, but I wish you all the best." He placed his still full glass on the table and walked away, just as the airport announcer signaled the start of boarding for their flight to Hawaii. Chaos erupted behind him. Chairs scraped violently against the floor, glasses shattered, and the air filled with frantic shouts as everyone began yelling at one another. Through the clamor, Tom heard Amy's desperate voice calling his name, but he didn't look back. He had done exactly what his lawyer had advised before the divorce proceedings. "I had refrained from speaking to Amy until our first meeting in Sally's office. Our lawyers had bickered for what felt like hours, and today was supposed to be the day we finalized everything and signed the papers. Amy insisted on a 30-minute one-on-one meeting after all the formalities, and I figured she wanted to explain her choices that led to the unraveling of our marriage." In preparation for the trial, Sally had hired a private investigator to look into Chuck's background. The findings were shocking, revealing the intricate financial arrangements my soon-to-be ex-wife had made with her 4 lovers. Discovering she had been cheating on me for nearly a year was devastating, but accepting that truth helped extinguish the last remnants of any feelings I had for Amy. Sally later informed me that Amy never boarded the flight to Hawaii. Her non-refundable tickets went unused, and her fully paid vacation was cancelled with no chance for monetary compensation. When we gathered at the negotiation table, Amy tried repeatedly to engage me in conversation, but I ignored her until every last paper was signed. Once the lawyers shook hands and left the room, we found ourselves alone. I took a seat across from her, my gaze steady and unwavering, encouraging her to speak first. "Thank you for," she began, her voice quiet and uncertain. Tom sat across the table from Amy, an air of tension hanging between them like a thick fog. Tears glistened in her eyes, reflecting the overhead lights as she spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you, Tom. But I still don't understand why you divorced me. What I did meant absolutely nothing. It was just a business agreement, a commercial service, nothing more. You were the only man I've ever truly loved, and you still are." She leaned forward, reaching out to take his hands in hers, but he recoiled, crossing his arms over his chest. He maintained a cold, distant gaze, staring through her rather than at her. Amy's tears began to fall freely, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Tom, please. We've always had such a good time together. Why can't we leave this misunderstanding behind? It was just a stupid deal." Tom raised a hand to silence her. "Amy, I believe you when you say that selling yourself to those men didn't mean much to you. To you, it was just like letting them wash your feet or give you a pedicure, right?" She nodded eagerly, her head bobbing like a puppet on strings, which made him suppress a chuckle. He thought of how naive she seemed, but there was a deeper pain behind his amusement. "Sorry, correction, a lot of acts that didn't really mean anything to anyone. Am I understanding this correctly?" Her tear-streaked face brightened as if he had just given her a revelation. "Yes. Oh my God, honey. You finally understand that all of this meant nothing to me." Tom raised his hand again, cutting through her wild joy. "Yes, Amy, it took me a while, but now I get it. Everything you did was just a business deal to you. But here's the nuance you seem to be missing, it meant a lot to me." He leaned in, his voice firm. "When you agreed to sell yourself to those men, did you really think I would be okay with it?" Amy lowered her gaze, biting her lip and fidgeting with the napkin in her hands, turning it white-knuckled. "Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Maybe it didn't mean anything to you, but you knew it meant everything to me." Tom stood up abruptly, pulling two crumpled $100 bills from his back pocket. He placed them on the table in front of her. "Thank you for your time today. Keep your usual fee." Amy shuddered as if he had slapped her, her eyes widening in disbelief. She closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks, mingling with the remnants of her smeared makeup. Her lips trembled as she struggled to contain her emotions. Tom turned on his heel and walked away, the sound of her quiet sobs following him like a ghost. As he stepped out of the cafe, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders but also a profound sadness settle in. Amy was no longer the woman he had loved, she was now a stranger. What do you think of today's story? I appreciated the numerous twists and turns. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you in the next video.